Howdy, folks. This is Chris White, and you're listening to Basic Business Advice. Here today with Tyler Needing, our producer. And Tyler, as always, we say he's out on his own now at Needing Media. And so if you need something out and about, get a hold of Tyler at Needing Media. Tyler, you're on Facebook.
Yep.
And any place else?
Instagram, and I have a website. So find Tyler if you need him for audio, visual, and in between. Appreciate it.
And also Kevin West. Kevin, friend of the firm, friend of Rice Spaces, multiple time guest on the podcast. And Kevin just finished a mastermind that'll be on YouTube probably in about a month here.
Yep.
Really great watch. But Kevin, I want to lean in on something you were talking about. So set the stage for us here. You're not just a coach, but you get coached. Mm-hmm. You're part of a high performers group, and you were in California recently. And something happened that made you sweat a little bit just watching it happen. So tell the listeners about what happened.
Well, I think that when I joined the group initially, I wanted to be challenged. And it's kind of funny that we often sign up for things that we want to do, and then when we are in there, we're wondering why we did it. Yeah. And so we were in California and Los Angeles, and we were in a breakout in our breakout session. And in our breakout session, they had what's called the hot seat, and the facilitator, of our group was there that day, and they brought John up. John decided he would go first. I was praying they wouldn't pick me. I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for this yet. I need to see it. And a lot of my fear, it's kind of funny. There's something about discomfort, and that you need to embrace when you're trying to go to another level. And so the whole time, as much as the anxiety kind of rolled in those moments, I was still calming myself through the lens of, this is what it's going to take to go to another level, Kevin. This is, you're going to have to be uncertain. You're going to have to be, uncomfortable. You're going to have to be criticized. You're going to have to go through some things that you don't want to go through to get where you want to go. And so I never thought in a million years that I would see that like right in front of my eyes, because John got into the hot seat, and I was grateful that I wasn't. And then there was a part of me that wish I was. But then when all of a sudden John started sharing his aspirations, we were going through what's called primary aspiration theory. And so primary aspiration theory is the lens of laying out your aspirations in a very clear lens and understanding what are the actions that are needed to be taken in order to be able to affect that in a positive way. The one thing that we were focusing on as high performers was the idea of acceleration. How do we accelerate our aspirations? So often we overestimate the amount of time. You've heard Tony Robbins say, we overestimate what we can do in a year, but we vastly underestimate what we can do in 5. And so in this case, it was a 6-month aspiration. He had to lay it out, and he had just finished. All of us are content creators in there. And so he had created a program. It was a $10,000 a month program. And he had a 6-month goal of getting $500,000. His aspiration was, I'd like to get $500,000 in this in 6 months. And immediately the facilitator stopped him and said, how are you going to do it? What are the moves? Because we always talk about what the moves are. And he says, well, I've already started making the moves. There were 100 potential affiliates, but I've narrowed it down to 25 that I really think that can move the needle for this. And John was sharing, what he was thinking through in terms of what the terms would be. And typically an affiliate is somebody who would sell your program, and then they would get a piece of it. And he was saying, hey, if these people would be open to sharing that to their audiences, he would give them a 25% cut of that, and then they would and do that over 6 months. And the facilitator just looked at him and just said, good, call him right now. Close him right now. And John was like gasping, and I'm going, now I'm really glad I'm not. Right? And John just got up and walked over to the wall, and we were outside at the Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles, and he walked over to this wall and was on the phone for like 45 minutes. And he comes back and he goes, they all said yes. And I'm sitting there now at this point, it's kind of funny because at this point I'm going like, man, I'm glad it worked out for him.
Yeah.
I'm glad that worked out. And then the facilitator stopped. He says, great, I need you to call him back again. And John said, excuse me? And he says, I need you to call him back again. I need you to call them and make a better deal. And he says, John, tell me what a better deal would be. And he says, 50%? He goes, give me a timeline. And he said, 3 months? Less. And then eventually the facilitator goes, 24 hours.
Good Lord.
And he was like, okay. Like, he goes, you're ready to go, right? You said you're ready to go. Are you ready to go? Or are you not ready to go? He goes, yeah, it's ready to go. He says, good, launch it. So he walked over, another 45 minutes, comes back. He goes, everybody said yes. So then it was like a waiting game, right? Then everybody applauded. You know, we were all like, yay, that kind of thing. And, that sense of relief really came after that, because I was going, okay, it's not as scary, as I thought it was going to be. It was hard. And we always, coach through high performance framework of clarity, energy, courage. It happened like right there, like right there in that moment. And so what ended up happening is next day he shows up and pops his phone open, and his bank account had $272,000 in it. And he gave half of it away. He hit his 6-month goal in 24 hours. And his point to us was that we are so often we sell ourselves short, or our ability short in terms of what we can accomplish if we really put our minds to it and really work through the fear of asking. He probably would have never asked that on his own. He would have not danced quite that way had he not had a coach. Had he not had somebody who would say, let's constrain the timeline. Let's really make this happen now. And what does that look like? And that inspired me, because it made me rethink everything, every aspiration, every goal that I had. I need to be more focused in terms of what are the steps really going to produce more of a tangible result. And what I realized was what I turned into 5 steps really should be 1. And I had 5 steps in one of my aspirations that I was working on at the time. And I realized that all 5 of those were really 1 move. And I just needed to do it. And then that's when the courage kicks in. That's when the prioritization kicks in. That's when all those other aspects kick in terms of accomplishing it. But seeing that happen was mind-bending. And it really did kind of it really encouraged me to have a level of courage with myself that I was unwilling to have before.
So I love this imagery of the hot seat. People use those in different scenarios. There was a viral video not too long ago of a bungee jump. That's a guy sits in they sit in chairs, and they push them off. And the guy was like, "Let me ask you something." He was like panicking in the chair, and he's sitting in this white lawn chair, and the guys are hooking him up, and he's like, "Let me ask you." And they keep tipping him back to get him off, and he keeps panicking, and eventually they just push, and he's gone. And it's hilarious watching him try to convince them once he's already in the seat. That maybe this is not something he wants to do. How important, obviously getting to the point of being willing to sit in that seat and be challenged and be pushed. But how important is it to have somebody around who was willing to push you once you're in that chair, to push you to do that? Because that seems like that's a super important role that a lot of people don't have in their lives. That coach who's willing to go, you sat here you go. How important is that?
Well, and let me note, one of my biggest notes was it wasn't the first push that really moved the needle. It was the second one.
Yeah.
And I was asking myself, am I the kind of coach who will do the second push? Am I willing to ask for a little bit more? And I can provoke an action. The level of trust is established with somebody when you can guide them through that initial push. Then now am I going to leverage that trust? Because that second ask was a big ask. That second one was a much tougher situation for, I think, John. But because John did the first one, it was a game changer. It created a level of immediacy that wasn't present before. Before it was like, I already talked to 100 people and they kind of know the lay of the land with the 25%. Now he's going 50 in 24 hours. Now that second push was really the part that I'm paying attention to more in my coaching, more in my conversations, because if I can establish trust in the first, then why not go for it?
So that first one was good enough, but it wasn't great.
Yes.
And I can't even remember who said that. The enemy of great is good enough.
Yeah, Jim Collins.
Yeah. That's crazy, because you think how terrifying that would have been to say, hey, Tyler, go call these 20 people right now and close this. That's terrifying. But then go back and call them again within an hour and say, hey, I've got a better deal for you.
Yeah.
How much head trash do you have to be able to get around to be trusting enough of somebody that push you a second time off of something that's already terrifying to do it all over again? That's just crazy.
Well, and you have to look at this, and the conversations we had after that were rich, because we all were blown away by the context. And even when we got together the next day and we were seeing the result of it, it was one of those things where we were talking about the concept of bold adjustments. There's always this context of adjustments, but we make so many tiny little adjustments, and tiny adjustments are appropriate in that sense. But bold adjustments sometimes are what's called for, but we're so used to making tiny ones. We're not conditioned to make bold adjustments. And what that person did, the facilitator did in that case, was he made a bold adjustment.
Sure.
And it made me ask myself, Kevin, where am I making tiny adjustments when I need to be making bold ones?
That is so important to have somebody in your life who, when you think you've maxed out the needle in the red, is going, no, you're not even close.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that I feel like we're entering into, and I would say culturally and economically, going into this new season, is we are so conditioned to think that people can't handle it. And so we kind of like halfway ask, or our adjustments are very measured in terms of what we're asking of people. I think it's going to be critical that we move into a bold adjustment focus because of the nature of the things that are outside of our control. I mean, you got to think about it. We're having, the edge of recession. There's a war going on, right? When you think of all of the dynamic, you have a ton of uncertainty. I mean, you have, basically a crisis in a sense. But we are so TikToked, I think, in terms of being distracted. We're not realizing like how big all these things are. There's all kinds of things going on. We have political, division, all kinds of other things. When you look at the trifecta of all of that, it's massive. Mm-hmm. And then I think what it does, it just shrinks us. It just shrinks us. And then we don't want to shake the trees. We don't want to bother anybody. We just came out of a season where, we wanted to be safe and we wanted to cope. And now we have to go into a world now that's going to require performance. It's going to require value add. It's going to require energy and vibrancy and focus.
Sure.
And really, producing outcomes that really move the needle. And I don't know if people are going to be ready for that, because we're so conditioned to make small moves. We forgot what it's like to make big ones. And I think that you got to think about what was business like back, before pre-pandemic. It was, gangbusters. It was people devouring each other. It was this crazy thing. And now it's way more passive. Mm-hmm. The whole other side of business is so different today. And we built, all of we have like the nap spaces and they're built, and all the people, the number of vacations that are being taken that people are using to cope and those kind of things. I think we're going to have to go into a season of challenge and change. And I'm not sure we're all ready for it. And I think as a coach, I'm trying to do my best to, hey, we need to be making bold adjustments.
Well, you say, I love what you just said, because with this push comes back to something that you talked about this morning about the point in this journey where courage has to kick in. The courage to follow through. The courage, and it sounds like what you're describing is challenge, is that this is going to require courage.
Yes. Yes. I think we've been so saturated with so many different voices. We've kind of forgotten that to really define our own outcomes and what kind of clarity we're bringing to the areas of our lives or the work, wherever we work, or, our personal development or whatever that is. We haven't really clarified what we want. And because we haven't clarified what we want, our energy is just kind of going everywhere. And we've been dabbling in so many things that we never get to the courage part. There isn't that big ask I need to make, or that tell that I need to inform everyone, because I don't want to be judged. And there's a fear of responsibility, essentially, that builds into this, that I think lives underneath all of it. And it's something that we're going to have to figure out. Someone's going to figure it out.
Sure. But not everybody.
Not everybody. I think this is going to be a season of separation. And it's going to be tough. I really do. And I just feel like I really believe that there's certain muscles that we're going to have to build to be ready for the challenges that are coming, that we're not ready for.
So it sounds like what you're saying is not a harbinger of doom, but a reading of the tea leaves.
Yes. Yeah. The seasons, right? You see the seasons change. And when you notice that there's a season changing, you prepare for that season.
So let's prepare.
Okay.
Let's do that. Let's walk the steps right now. You've got somebody listening who's like, oh boy, I think Kevin's right. I'm starting to see some of those signs myself. What's the first thing they need to do to start getting ready to be brave for the challenge?
I think it starts with you. I think it's Chris White. It's Chris White. It's whoever's listening. It's you have to be committed to the best version of yourself that you possibly can be, with the highest level of standards that you can set for yourself. And you have to be really clear about what it looks like, what it feels like, how it walks down the hall, and how it drives the car, and how it engages the Starbucks drive-through barista. Every aspect of how people interact with you and connect with you, you have to be thinking about what's my presence. And so when it comes to my family, when it comes to my finances, when it comes to my relationships, when it comes to my hobbies, when it comes to my spiritual life, all those things need to be really clear about who you are, because it's an inside-out deal. I think the whole idea of positioning in this season is going to be the healthiest internal person that you are, the most dynamic that you can be within the context of who you are and what your aspirations are. So let's get really clear about what that is. What's the difference you want to make? What outcomes do you want to produce in the lives of other people that either you're leading, or the business that you're owning, or your family? What am I trying to do? Be really clear about that. And again, this takes time. So, but you need to spend that time. If it's a day going to, Starbucks and sitting down and getting a journal out and writing it out, it's just, you got to get it out of your head, and you got to get articulate about it. Because when you have that level of clarity, the energy is part of it, because you're always going to be forced about what you're going to do. So that would be the second part of it. What am I going to do? How am I going to prioritize those things? And then I will guarantee you, in order to be able to do those things, you're going to say something to yourself like, wow, if I really do that, I'm going to look like a hypocrite. Because maybe in the past, I haven't done anything about this, or I've kind of let that go. I've never made bold adjustments. And now this is a bold adjustment. What are people going to think?
Sure.
And now all your head trash starts kicking in, and what you say to yourself about yourself starts kicking in, and that's the game. And that's where the courage comes in. The courage isn't going to be with everybody else. That's all made up stuff that you do to yourself about weird crap like that. It's really you talking to you and getting out of your own way and believing in your ability to, hey, this is within my ability. This is the difference I can make, and I'm going to lean into it and do it. And then when you get into that part of it, now you start seeing the priorities that have to occur, and that becomes part of your productivity. At the end of all of that, you get those 4 things in place, your clarity, your energy, your courage, and your productivity. And people are going to want a piece of you. The impact are going to be, hey, Chris, can we have coffee? Mm-hmm. Hey, can I have some of your time? Would you come and talk to our team? Would you, hey, we have an opportunity here we'd like you to think about and talk. We'd like to talk with you about that, because people are attracted to people who are clear within who they are and where they're going, and then really visually making progress towards it, activating. And I think we have just been in this holding pattern for so long. You got to think about the last few years. Everything was wait and see.
Right.
And now we got to get out and go. And I feel like that's the biggest thing I'm pushing people to is, hey, all my clients, everyone I'm coaching online, hey, we have to be active, and we have to be moving forward, making bold adjustments.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like there's something to be said here, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about fatigue. Mm-hmm. There was the fatigue of getting through the uncertainty, and there's potentially more uncertainty to come. If this is a moment in between the two, where there's not bright lines that separate them, but if this is a moment between the two, how does somebody get ready to do it again, to embrace the uncertainty again, to lean in when everybody else is leaning out? How do they get ready for that?
That's a great question, Chris. I do think that we have to go back, to fundamentals, and the fundamentals are going to be in our self-care. I've noticed that there's a direct connection to the level of confidence that people have and the level of self-care that they do. And I learned this the most in the last year because I've been on a weight loss journey. Mm-hmm. So I've lost, I want to say 65 pounds, almost 70 pounds. And in the process of that, my sleep has had to come into play. My food has had to come into play. It wasn't just going to the gym. It wasn't just hiring a trainer, although the trainer was very important in terms of accountability.
Right.
But it's that whole idea of fundamentals. It's your physiology. It's your psychology. It's your productivity. It's your purpose. It's dialing into, those fundamental aspects and just saying, hey, look, I know that if my level of self-care is where it needs to be. And I'm not talking about the froofy kind. I'm not talking about, self-care in terms of like hugging ourselves and all that kind of stuff. I'm just talking about the fundamentals of, taking care of yourself. Mm-hmm. And I think, the pandemic did a good job of getting us in that mindset. But I think at the same time, we can't let go of it. And I think at this point, you have to make sure those fundamentals, if I'm coaching somebody, those fundamentals have to be in place. We have to build on that part of it, because if they're not confident, I'm looking at, hey, are you getting your sleep? Mm-hmm. I'm looking at some of those, what are you eating? Are you taking, are you making choices about, supplements and your water? There's just certain aspects of that I think are important. To me, it's physiology at that stage.
Tyler, do you have any questions or any thoughts?
I told Kevin this morning, always ruins my day. In the best way possible. No, I'm processing a lot currently, if I'm honest, I told him, I was like, when he came in here, I was like, after listening to the mastermind, you were talking about being in the hot seat, and now I'm a little nervous because there's only going to be 3 of us in this room. So I can't hide behind the other 15 people in the room,
right?
Hoping you don't ask me to be in the hot seat. Yeah, I don't know. I have a lot I'm thinking about with my business and my life, my family, and and things that I want to do in the future and what that looks like. I feel like if I'm completely honest, I've been in a pretty like lax position probably. 2020 was really good for me, oddly enough, because everyone else was panicking and realizing they needed content. So like I've been in that place of just kind of like, oh, this is good. I'm just kind of hanging out and like business is coming to me. But I want to push harder. And I know that means a lot of things. That means time and sleep and kind of figuring that all out. So Kevin and I are going to have lunch or breakfast or something.
Nice.
Soon.
Well, and let me speak to that a little bit because, often, when I'm with people and we talk about things like that, they want to lead with their dissatisfactions.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a form of clarity. So be intimate. Take your dissatisfactions on a date.
Yep.
And sit down with your dissatisfactions and date your dissatisfactions. And ask all the questions that you would if you're trying to get to know them. Because we're intimate with them in some ways, but we've never really asked, the deeper questions around those dissatisfactions. And then it's worth a cup of coffee and a journal to sit down and go and ask yourself, why do I do that? Or how come I have allowed that to be the case? And what's the real root cause of that? And that's where, when I was talking earlier about the fear of responsibility, fear of loss and less and never and fear of failure and all those other things, people can say that, but the one thing that I see over and over and over again is that fear of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
It's if I go to that level, I have to maintain that level.
Yep.
And there's a cost to maintaining that. And I'm unsure that I'm going to be able to hold out or maintain the behaviors that are going to produce that for a long period of time. And then all of a sudden, then what will people say or what will people think? And to be honest, no one really gives a rip about you. I mean, when it really comes down, nobody's thinking about me. No one's looking at me and going like, "Oh, wow, he must be this," or like, no one cares. We get our minds so wrapped around what other people think, and then it keeps us small. It keeps us from making the really kinds of decisions that are life altering and life changing and beneficial for yourself and the people you love. So I take your dissatisfactions on a date, my friend, and have coffee with them. And then when you have all your answers for that, then sit down with me and then let's talk about that. Because I've got a feeling that I got that second push somewhere in there.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? And I think when we get into the second push, I think we might be able to have some breakthroughs. And I think people need breakthroughs today more than ever. I think we've been searching and dabbling and being frustrated and shiny object ourselves, and social media has gaslit us and all this other dynamics. And
Gosh, it's the worst, isn't it?
We just have to get back to the fundamentals of us, ourselves, and within our control and our span of control.
Yeah.
And then leverage it and lean into it.
That's really solid. We need to make sure we put up the mastermind at the same time as this podcast. That way people can go check, because you go deep on some of the ideas and some of the tools that people can use to do this during the mastermind. So we'll try and get these put up together. So if you're listening to the podcast first, go follow this up with Kevin's mastermind, on the Rise mastermind, and this will be good follow up to that. So Kevin, thank you so much, man. As always.
Glad to be here. Glad to be with you guys.
Listeners, just so you know, if you're listening to this before November 2nd, 2023, GapCon is this year. This is our 11th year of doing the business conference. And if you are looking for tickets, or if you're a sponsor looking for an opportunity to get in front of people, go to gapconohio.com. You can sign up for tickets, you can sign up for sponsorship, and we hope to see you there. So on behalf of Kevin and Tyler, this is Chris White. Thanks for listening. Sweet dude. Cool.